The coffee pot had just finished its cycle when I heard the front door close. I wasn't supposed to be home. My flight from Seattle landed 4 hours early. A miracle, the gate agent called it, smiling like she'd personally rearranged the clouds. I didn't argue. I just grabbed my carry-on, bypassed the rideshare line, and took a cab straight home because all I wanted was my own bed and the particular silence of a Tuesday afternoon in a house that was mine. The coffee pot was still warm. 2 mugs sat in the drying rack beside the sink. I own 1 mug. It's white with a small crack on the handle that I keep meaning to replace. The second mug was burgundy. It didn't belong to me. I stood in my kitchen for a long time looking at those 2 mugs, the kind of looking where you understand something before your brain gives you permission to say it out loud. My husband's car was in the driveway. I'd assumed he was working from home. He worked from home on Tuesdays. I set my bag down very gently. I'm not sure why. Like some part of me already knew that whatever was happening upstairs, I didn't want to announce myself yet. The stairs in our house creak on the 3rd and 7th step. I had learned to skip them the way you learn anything that becomes second nature, without thinking about it. That afternoon, I skipped them without thinking about it. The bedroom door was pulled almost shut, not latched, just resting against the frame the way it does when someone closes it carelessly. There was a voice inside. 2 voices, and then a laugh, one I didn't recognize, low and easy, like someone completely comfortable in a space that wasn't theirs. I should have opened the door. I know that now. I should have pushed it open with both hands and made them look at me. But I stood there in my own hallway with my heart doing something architectural to my chest, and I couldn't move. What I did instead was reach into my cardigan pocket, unlock my phone, and press record. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough to hear his voice say her name, and the name was one I recognized, which made it so much worse. It was my coworker, a woman I'd had lunch with 3 weeks before, a woman who had asked me, over a Cobb salad, how things were going at home. I walked back down the stairs. I skipped the 3rd and 7th steps. I picked up my bag, walked out the front door, got back into the cab that was still idling at the curb because I'd forgotten to close the app, and I said, very calmly, the name of the nearest hotel. The driver didn't ask any questions. I appreciated that more than I can explain. My husband's name is Daniel. We had been married for 4 years. Before that, we dated for 2, which means I had spent 6 years building a life around someone who was, I understand this now, a very convincing imitation of the person I thought he was. He's charming in the specific way that certain men are charming, attentive in public, present just enough at home, good at remembering the names of your friends' children and the details of your work stories. People liked him. My mother liked him. My best friend liked him, though she'd moved to Portland and we mostly talked by phone now, which meant Daniel had never had to perform for her at close range. I want to be clear that I was not naive. I want to be clear because I've spent a lot of time since then wondering if there were signs, and the answer is, there were not obvious ones. There were small things I had filed away under, we've been together 6 years and this is what 6 years looks like. The late nights, the phone turned face down at dinner. The way he'd stopped asking about my day with any real curiosity, and I'd stopped noticing that he had. We had been trying for a baby for 8 months. That detail matters. I need you to understand the particular cruelty of that context. At the hotel, I sat on the edge of the bed and watched the video twice. The second time, I was looking for something I might have misread, some angle of shadow or ambient explanation that would make the burgundy mug mean something different. There was nothing. It was exactly what it was. I called my sister, who lives in Cincinnati and picks up on the second ring regardless of the time. I told her what I'd found. She said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Do not go back to that house tonight. Do you hear me? Do not go back." I told her I was already in a hotel. "Good," she said. "Now I need you to listen to me very carefully. My sister is practical in the way that oldest siblings often are. She talked me through the next few steps like she was guiding me through a recipe. Not cold, just clear, because she knew that clarity was what I needed. She said, "Find a divorce attorney before you say a single word to Daniel." She said, "Do not delete that video, back it up in 3 places right now." She said, "Check the joint account in the morning before he has a chance to move anything." I did all of those things. I backed up the video to my cloud storage, my email, and a separate account I created from scratch in the hotel bathroom. I made an appointment with an attorney for Thursday morning. I checked the joint account. I ordered room service that I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. What I did instead was lie in the dark and take inventory. I thought about the 8 months of ovulation tracking and prenatal vitamins and the way Daniel had held my hand in the waiting room of the fertility clinic last spring, looking like exactly the kind of husband you bring to a fertility clinic. I thought about the Cobb salad. I thought about what trying for a baby means when one of you isn't really in the marriage anymore. By morning, I had something that felt less like grief and more like precision. I found out I was pregnant 11 days later. I took the test in the restroom of a coffee shop 3 blocks from my office because I couldn't face doing it at home. And when the result appeared, I sat in that stall for a very long time with the test in my hand and the sound of the city moving past the window, like everything outside was completely indifferent. I need to be careful here because what I felt standing in that restroom was complicated, and I want to honor that complication. There was a version of this news, the version I had spent 8 months hoping for, that would have made me cry from joy. That version existed, and it was real, and part of me mourned it right there in that coffee shop bathroom. But the pregnancy I was now holding proof of existed inside a different version of my life than the one I'd been imagining. It existed in the version where my husband had another woman in our bed while I was on a work trip, in the version where I was 6 days out from meeting with a divorce attorney and had already begun the process of separating our finances, in the version where I had not told Daniel yet that I knew and was not going to until my attorney told me the timing was right. Bringing a child into that version of my life, into that specific damage, was something I needed to think about very seriously, and I did. I thought about very little else for the next week. I will not explain or justify the decision I made. It was mine to make. I made it. I called my OB/GYN's office on a Wednesday morning and scheduled a consultation for the following Friday. The scheduler asked if I had a preferred provider within the practice. I said whoever was available was fine. I didn't think anything of it. Why would I? The clinic was in a medical building downtown, neutral and quiet, the kind of space designed to feel neither cold nor warm. I checked in at the front desk and took a seat in the waiting area with a magazine I didn't read. When the nurse came to bring me back, she was kind and unhurried. She walked me to the consultation room and told me the doctor would be in shortly. I sat on the paper-covered table and looked at the framed print on the wall, a generic watercolor of the ocean, and thought about how many women had sat in this exact spot looking at this exact ponting. The door opened. I looked up. The woman who walked in was tall, with dark hair pulled back and the particular composure of someone who has been performing composure professionally for a long time. She looked down at the chart in her hand. Then she looked up at me. I recognized her in the same instant she recognized me. Her name was Dr. Rebecca Calloway. She was Daniel's younger sister. I had met her exactly 3 times at our wedding, at a Thanksgiving 4 years ago, and briefly at a birthday dinner for Daniel's mother last spring. We had no relationship to speak of. We had exchanged polite conversation at a table. I would not have called us close. But she knew who I was, and I knew who she was, and we were both sitting in this room together in a way that neither of us had anticipated. The silence lasted longer than silences usually do. She was the one who broke it. She said my name. Not a greeting, just the name, spoken quietly like she was confirming something. I said yes. She set the chart down on the counter and crossed her arms, not defensively, but like she was steadying herself. She said, "I want you to know that you can request a different provider right now before anything else happens. There are 2 other physicians in this practice, and either one would see you today." I looked at her for a moment. Then I said, "Do you know why I'm here?" She said she had read the consultation notes. She knew what I was there for. I said, "Do you know anything else about what's been happening?" Her expression shifted in a way I couldn't quite name. Something moved behind her eyes, not surprise exactly. Something more like a complicated kind of recognition. She said, "My brother called me 2 weeks ago. He didn't tell me details, but he said things weren't good at home and he was trying to figure out how to tell you something." I let that sit. Then I said, "I already know. I found out on my own." She nodded very slowly. She didn't ask how. She didn't try to explain her brother or soften what I'd just said. She looked at me with an expression that I have thought about many times since. It was the face of someone doing the math and not liking the sum. She said, "What would you like to do?" And I understood that she was asking more than one question. I asked her if she would recuse herself and send in another doctor. She didn't argue. She didn't try to talk me out of it, or use the moment to have a different conversation. She simply said, "Of course," picked up the chart, and left the room. The second doctor was a woman named Dr. Osi, who was warm and thorough and professional in all the ways that mattered. I am grateful for her. The appointment was hard in the way that the appointment was hard, and afterward I sat in my car in the parking structure for about 20 minutes before I felt ready to drive. What I hadn't anticipated was what would happen next. 3 days later, I got a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. When I called back, it was Rebecca. She was not calling as Daniel's sister. She was careful to say that, careful and deliberate, like she had thought about the distinction before dialing. She said that she had gone home after our appointment and had not been able to stop thinking. She said she had called her brother that evening, not to tell him anything about me, but to ask him directly about what he'd told her 2 weeks ago. She said he lied to her. She said she knew he was lying because she knows what her brother looks like when he lies. She's known it since they were children, and he looked exactly like that. And she said something else. She said that what he'd told her 2 weeks earlier, vaguely and without details, had framed me as the source of whatever was wrong. That the language he'd used, without quite saying anything specific, had been designed to get her on his side before I had a chance to be on my own. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I've been used as a character witness before in my brother's version of events. I'm not willing to do that again." I asked her what she meant by again. She told me. It took about 15 minutes. I'm not going to repeat everything she said because some of it belongs to her, not to me. But the summary is, Daniel had done something like this before, not to a wife, but the pattern. The managed narrative, the preemptive reputation management, the way he positioned himself before anyone else could speak. That pattern had a history. I asked her why she was telling me this. She said, "Because you didn't deserve to walk into that room. And because I'm not going to pretend I didn't walk into it with you." My attorney's name is Margaret, and she is exactly the kind of person you want in your corner when your life is being disassembled, methodical, unemotional, and entirely unmoved by charm. I had already given her the video. I had already given her the financial records I'd been quietly gathering for 3 weeks. What I brought her now was something different. Rebecca agreed to provide a written statement. She was careful about what she included and what she left out, and Margaret was careful about how she used it. It documented the pattern. It documented the phone call where Daniel had preemptively tried to shape the narrative. It corroborated, in a way that a stranger couldn't, the deliberate nature of what had been happening in my marriage. I want to be honest, I don't know exactly what Rebecca's statement cost her. Family is complicated, and whatever her relationship with Daniel was before, I'm not naive enough to think it was unchanged after. She made a choice that had consequences I wasn't able to see from where I was standing. What I know is that she made it anyway. I finally told Daniel I was filing for divorce on a Thursday evening. I had moved out by then. I was staying with a colleague who had a second bedroom and no patience for infidelity, which made her an excellent temporary roommate. I called him rather than meeting in person because Margaret had advised it, and because I had nothing left to say to his face that I wanted to say. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said he wanted to talk. He said things could be worked out. He said the word "us" 3 times in the space of 2 minutes, which I noted. I told him Margaret would be in touch. He said her name like a question, and I realized he'd been expecting a different call. The kind where I cried and he explained, and we ended up, somehow, back in the place where he had all the information, and I had only what he chose to give me. I told him to have a good evening and I ended the call. The divorce took 7 months. I won't list the details because they're boring in the way that legal processes are boring. A lot of documents and deadlines and waiting. What I will tell you is that the video held up, the financial disclosures held up, and the picture Margaret was able to build, patient, thorough, documented, was the picture of a man who had been systematically dishonest for a long time. He contested very little in the end. I think he understood what contesting it would require him to put in the public record. The house sold in 3 weeks. It was a good market. I have an apartment now. It's the first place I've ever lived alone, which at 32 is a strange thing to discover about yourself. That you've never actually been alone in your own space, never gone from college roommates to your own 4 walls without a relationship filling the gap. The apartment is quiet in a way I didn't know I needed. I can make coffee without watching to see what mood someone else is in. I can leave a book open on the couch and come back and it's still open to the same page. I saw Rebecca once after everything was finalized. It was accidental. We were both at a farmer's market on a Saturday morning and she was holding a bunch of kale and looking at it with the focused expression of someone making a real decision about kale. I almost walked the other direction. I don't know why. Maybe because the whole thing had been so specific and strange, and I wasn't sure what the protocol was for running into the sister-in-law who chose your side. She saw me first. She raised her hand in a small wave, not effusive, just present. I walked over. We stood there for a moment, both holding reusable bags, in the way of people who have been through something together and are encountering each other on the other side of it. I said thank you. I had said it before in a formal way, through the appropriate channels. But this was different. This was just me, saying it. She nodded. She said she hoped things were going well. I said they were, and I meant it, which still surprised me a little. She turned back to the kale, and I went to go find the table with the good strawberries, and we didn't need to say anything else. I keep the video in a folder I don't often open. I don't need it anymore, legally or otherwise. But I keep it because it was the moment everything clarified, the moment I stopped waiting for the world to make sense on its own and picked up my phone and decided to witness it myself. I was 31 years old, standing in my own hallway, not sure what I was going to do next. And then I pressed record. I'm not a different person now. I don't believe that difficulty transforms you into something better. I think that's a story we tell to make hard things feel worthwhile. What I believe is that I'm the same person, making clearer choices in a life that is actually mine. The coffee pot was still warm when I walked back into that kitchen. I poured the coffee down the drain. I washed both mugs. I put mine back on the shelf and left the burgundy one on the counter for Daniel to collect, which he eventually did, without comment, along with his record collection and the good Dutch oven and 3 years of accumulated items that had belonged to a version of my life I was done living. I bought myself a new mug. It's navy, no cracks in the handle. I use it every morning. When love breaks quietly, you don't always hear it go. You come home to a coffee pot and 2 mugs and a silence that has been there longer than you realized, and you have to decide what to do with what you're seeing. I pressed record. I made my calls. I showed up to every appointment, signed every document, answered every question my attorney asked with complete honesty. And then I sold the house, packed my boxes, and started making coffee for one.